So Lance and Preston, both of you are pastors, and as shepherds of those congregations and the people in your communities, there's this role to, as people come to understand their identity and become more confident in their identity, to then start walking with them in this process of living into their identity.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious how you have seen that happen. What are your little tips for doing that, or how does this happen?
A few years ago in our community, the other pastor that I serve with, Evan, he had said that there's somebody in need in the community. A lady, she had some family issues, and she had to move out and be in her own place, and she had a couple kids that needed a bed. And so he stood up, he said, "Hey, we need a couple beds for a couple kids." There was a guy who was pretty new to our church, and he heard this, and he came forward and he said, "I feel like I can help this." And he said, I feel like I got a voice inside of me telling me that I need to help. So he went, and not only did he go and give some beds, but he decorated this lady's entire place. He bought furniture, he put stuff in her kitchen, he gave the kids toys, he put art on the wall, he decked the place out, and he came back. He said, "This is beautiful, this is exciting, what is going on?" And we said to him, "That's generosity. You just experienced a characteristic of following Jesus called generosity." And he said, "That's great. What's another one?" And so he is now part of our community, and he is the most generous, but that's not the only practice that he started. He started many practices, and he's brought his friends and other people to say, "You should try these Jesus things. These are really awesome." And so we have a whole community of people around him who are trying Jesus things all the time, and they're thrilled. And it's just exciting to see how not only did their identity come alive, but their practices reinforce that that's what God's doing inside of them.
Yeah. We were talking in class actually today at the end of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Gives a great story about building your life on two different foundations. And he wraps up this great teaching basically saying, you got to do the stuff. You got to practice this. And I love that about Jesus, that he invites us to experiment and to observe, and then to go from observation into connection, and then participation. Or he starts like, come and see to some people, they're curious, and then go and do. And often there's a time to just watch and participate. And again, CLBI gives us that time. A couple years ago, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, I don't know if you've heard the musician Beck. Beck has a following. He's got some really avant-garde albums, some wild albums. And so there's a buzz Beck's going to have a new album release, and he releases this album, except it's a really strange album. Zero recording. He just releases the sheet music. Just sheet music for all the songs. And so at first people are like, this is a gimmick. This is really lame. This is not an album. This is sheet music. But what happened was Beck fans really wanted to know the music. And so people started recording themselves playing these songs. You can look up on YouTube. There's endless interpretations and people practicing these songs and recording themselves. And so it's kind of a neat idea. If you wanted to hear the album, if you wanted to hear the music, you had to play the music. And I think the way of Jesus is often similar. If you really want to hear what it sounds like, I think Jesus would say, it's one thing to know the Beatitudes, but now go out and practice this, experiment this. And we need each other to do that. And I think that's where the gospel shows up. It's in between us. It's in between us where it becomes visible. So similar in our community, we're trying to grow in that, to not only be hearers, but doers of the word, and to practice the way of Jesus in community, and to just take non-heroic acts of service and practicing in a variety of ways in a weekly way. But I think that's one of CLBI's strong suits, is it gives us a chance, gives students a chance to come and see, and while you're here, to get a lot of time to do that, but also to get to go and do. one of my favorite parts about being made in the image of God, and up until that point in the story, is the first thing we learn about God is that God is creative and that God makes something out of nothing. And so part of, and many people have argued over what does the image of God mean, and what does it mean to carry that image into the world. And many people have said, well, it must at least include creativity, that we too are also supposed to make something of the world, or to take this creation and move it forward in some way. And one of my favorite definitions of creativity, because it's I think non-intimidating, is that creativity means just listening to curiosity instead of fear. And not a lot of us would say, oh, I'm not creative, I'm not artsy. But we're all, in the image of God, called to make something of the world. And creativity hangs on what you're going to do with your fear. And so I like that charge to carry God's work into the world in a creative manner. In fact, Jesus said, one of his things in I'm just thinking of this now, in the Beatitudes, when he said, blessed are the peacemakers, that phrase, that word peacemaker, is super beautiful, because it's got the two words peace and maker, and it's okay to talk a little Greek around a campfire. Yeah, okay. So the first word, peace, eirene, and then maker is poeos, and poeos sounds a lot like poet, and it's related to the word poet. And so you could be completely faithful to the scripture and interpret that, blessed are the peace poets, blessed are the peace painters, blessed are the peace makers. It really means making peace where there is no peace, making a relationship where it doesn't exist. And so then we receive that commissioning, then again, to make new relationship in the way of Jesus, making peace where there's enmity, in our families, in our industries, in our neighborhoods. Being a minister of reconciliation means to be a peacemaker, peace poet, peace painter, everywhere you find yourself, because God's really, really committed to all things being reconciled to himself. And so then suddenly that title of being a minister of reconciliation gets super creative and interesting, and there's all kinds of possibility, because it means following curiosity rather than fear. So that would be my hope for all of us, even as we go from this place, to be more curious than fearful, and that we would have more imagination to what ways would God be calling me? How is God, the ultimate artist, ultimate creator, making me to be a peace poet, a peace painter? And what relationships might I be called to work to mend and to heal, to make something new?